The line at the bursar's office stretched down the hallway like a judgment. Parents clutched envelopes, checkbooks, bank transfer receipts, each one a small declaration of their ability to provide. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with an irritating persistence that matched the anxiety humming through Rachel's chest. She stood near the back, her worn leather purse pressed against her side, feeling the weight of its emptiness more than if it had been filled with stones. Inside was exactly $47.63. The school fee deadline was today. The amount due was $2,800. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The math was impossible. It had been impossible for 3 weeks. Rachel's daughter Maya sat on a bench near the water fountain, her backpack resting between her feet, her eyes focused on a library book about marine biology. She was 12 years old and possessed the kind of quiet brilliance that teachers noticed immediately. The kind that came with scholarship potential, with future possibilities, with doors that could open wide, if only someone could afford to keep pushing them. Maya looked up and caught her mother's eye. She smiled, a small gesture of encouragement that pierced Rachel's heart. The girl had no idea how close she was to losing her place at Riverside Academy, the private school that had accepted her on a partial scholarship based on her exceptional test scores. The scholarship covered 60%. The remaining 40% might as well have been $4 million. The morning had started like any other in the small apartment Rachel shared with Maya on the east side of town. The building was old but clean, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and looked out for each other's children. Rachel had moved there 4 years ago after the divorce, after her ex-husband Thomas had decided that fatherhood was too much responsibility and a fresh start in another state was more appealing. She had woken at 5:30, as always, to prepare for her shift at the diner. The Bluebird Cafe sat on the corner of 5th and Marshall, a local institution that served breakfast and lunch to construction workers, office employees, and retired folks who came in for the company as much as the coffee. Rachel had worked there for 3 years, her feet learning the exact rhythm of the black and white checkered floor, her hands memorizing the weight of plates stacked 3 high. The pay was modest. The tips were unpredictable. Some days were generous, 20s left under coffee cups with sincere smiles. Other days brought nothing but loose change and the lingering smell of bacon grease in her hair. She had tried everything, extra shifts until her manager gently told her there were labor laws about how many hours she could work in a week. A second job cleaning offices on weekends, which she kept for 8 months until the company relocated and the contract ended. Selling the few pieces of jewelry she'd kept from her marriage, which had brought in enough to cover last month's utilities and groceries, but nothing more. Rachel had called the school 3 times in the past 2 weeks. The first call had been met with polite understanding. The second with firmer reminders about policy. The third with a quiet warning that if payment wasn't received by today, Maya would need to withdraw. She had thought about asking her sister Jennifer, but Jennifer was raising 3 kids on a teacher's salary after her own husband had lost his job. She had thought about her parents, but they were living on fixed retirement income in Florida, barely covering their own medical expenses. She had even briefly, desperately, considered one of those predatory payday loan places with interest rates that could swallow a person whole. But she'd done the math on that too, and it was just another trap, another hole that would take years to climb out of. The line moved forward. A woman in a business suit stepped away from the window, receipt in hand, relief visible in the loosening of her shoulders. Another parent moved up, handed over a check, exchanged pleasantries with the bursar. Rachel's phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out to see a text from her manager at the diner. "Hey, Rachel, can you cover dinner shift tonight? Denise called in sick." Another shift, more hours on her feet, maybe $30 in tips if she was lucky. She typed back a quick yes, because she always said yes, because what choice did she have? Maya was still reading, completely absorbed in whatever world the book was showing her. Coral reefs, probably. The girl was obsessed with the ocean, despite having seen it only once in her life during a weekend trip to the coast that Rachel had saved for over an entire year. Maya had stood at the edge of the water with such wonder that Rachel had taken a picture, one of the few photos she kept on her phone, returning to it whenever she needed to remember why she worked so hard. The dream was marine biology. Maya talked about it constantly, about studying ocean ecosystems and conservation, about maybe working for one of those research organizations that traveled to exotic locations. She'd already researched universities with strong marine biology programs, had started a notebook where she cataloged information about different species of fish and coral. But dreams required education. Education required money. And money was the one thing Rachel couldn't conjure out of thin air, no matter how hard she worked, or how many shifts she covered, or how many times she checked her bank account hoping the numbers had somehow magically changed. The line moved again. There were 5 people ahead of her now. Rachel's hands were trembling slightly. She pressed them together, willing them to be still. She had prepared a speech in her head, something about payment plans, about maybe splitting it over 2 months, about her work ethic and reliability. The bursar was a woman named Mrs. Patterson, older, with reading glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. Rachel had spoken with her twice before. She seemed kind, but kindness had limits when it came to institutional policy. A man in an expensive-looking charcoal suit walked past the line, not cutting in front, but moving toward the bulletin board on the opposite wall, where various school announcements were posted. He had the kind of presence that made people notice, not because he demanded attention, but because he carried himself with a quiet confidence that suggested he was accustomed to being listened to. Rachel barely registered him. Her focus was on the window ahead, on the conversation she would need to have, on the plea she would need to make. The man pulled out his phone, answered a call in a low voice. Rachel caught fragments of the conversation, something about quarterly reports and board meetings and investment portfolios. The language of people who dealt with money in amounts Rachel couldn't fathom, who made decisions about millions while she struggled with thousands. 3 people ahead of her now. Maya closed her book and looked up again. This time, there was a question in her eyes, a flicker of awareness that something wasn't quite right. Rachel forced another smile, gave her a small thumbs up. The girl nodded and returned to reading, but her posture had changed slightly, a tension creeping into her shoulders that mirrored her mother's. Children always knew. No matter how hard you try to shield them, they sensed the worry, absorbed the stress, carried burdens they shouldn't have to carry. Rachel thought about Maya's first day at Riverside Academy 8 months ago. The scholarship letter had arrived in March, unexpected and miraculous. Maya had been attending the public middle school, doing well, but struggling with class sizes of 35 students and teachers spread too thin to give anyone much individual attention. The opportunity to attend Riverside had felt like a door opening, like the universe acknowledging that this brilliant, determined child deserved more. The partial scholarship had seemed manageable at first. Rachel had calculated and recalculated, convinced she could make it work. And she had, for the first semester. Barely. By cutting every corner, by saying no to every extra expense, by eating cereal for dinner so Maya could have proper meals. But then the car had needed repairs. $400 for a new transmission part that couldn't be delayed. Then Rachel had gotten sick in December, missing a week of work with no paid sick leave. Then the landlord had raised the rent by $75 a month, a small increase that nonetheless threw off every carefully balanced calculation. Now here she was, $47.63 against $2,800. 2 people ahead. The woman directly in front of Rachel was talking on her phone, her voice carrying despite obvious attempts to speak quietly. She was discussing summer vacation plans, something about a villa in Tuscany. Rachel felt a strange detachment listening to it, as though the words were in another language entirely. Villa, Tuscany, summer vacation. Concepts from a different reality. She wasn't resentful exactly. She'd never been the type to begrudge others their good fortune. But there were moments, standing in lines like this, when the gap between her life and others felt so vast it might as well have been an ocean. The man in the charcoal suit finished his call and pocketed his phone. He glanced around the hallway, his gaze sweeping past the line of parents, past the children waiting on benches. For just a moment, his eyes met Rachel's. There was nothing particularly notable about it. just a brief point of contact between two strangers in a hallway. But something in his expression shifted, a small change Rachel couldn't quite identify. He looked away, back toward the bulletin board. One person ahead. Rachel's heart was pounding now, a steady drum against her ribs. She rehearsed the words again in her mind. Mrs. Patterson, I know the policy, but I'm asking if there's any possibility of a payment arrangement. I can provide references from my employer, proof of income, a history of my payments last semester. I'm reliable. I'm committed. My daughter deserves to be here. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The woman ahead of her stepped up to the window. Rachel heard the cheerful exchange, the rustling of papers, the clicking of keyboard. The transaction was smooth, easy, completed in less than 3 minutes. Then it was Rachel's turn. She stepped forward, her legs feeling unsteady. Mrs. Patterson looked up from her computer screen, her expression pleasant but neutral. She was a woman in her early 60s, with short gray hair and the kind of practical cardigan that suggested years of working in air-conditioned offices. Good afternoon. How can I help you? Rachel's throat felt dry. Hi, Mrs. Patterson. I'm Rachel Chun. I'm here about my daughter Maya's tuition payment for this semester. Recognition flickered across the older woman's face. Oh yes, Miss Chun. We've spoken on the phone. Her tone remained professional, but grew slightly more guarded. Do you have the payment today? This was the moment. Rachel opened her purse, then closed it again. I don't have the full amount. I have $47 right now, but I wanted to discuss the possibility of a payment plan. I know I spoke with you about this before, but I'm prepared to provide whatever documentation you need. I can commit to weekly payments. I work at the Bluebird Cafe, and I've just picked up additional shifts. I can bring in pay stubs, references, whatever would help demonstrate that I'm good for the full amount. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly, the look of someone who had probably had this conversation more times than she cared count. Miss Chun, I understand your situation, but as I explained in our previous conversations, the school's policy is quite clear. Tuition must be paid in full by the deadline date. We have these policies in place because the school relies on tuition payments to operate. Teachers need to be paid, facilities need to be maintained. I understand that, Rachel said quickly. I'm not asking for the payment to be waived. I'm asking for time, an extension, anything that would allow Maya to stay enrolled while I get the money together. I sympathize, I really do, but I don't have the authority to make exceptions to the payment policy. That would require approval from the headmaster, and even then, the Board of Trustees has been very firm about enforcing deadlines. We've had too many families fall behind in the past. Rachel felt the floor tilting slightly beneath her feet. Can I speak with the headmaster then? Today? Mrs. Patterson glanced at her computer screen. Mr. Whitmore is in meetings all afternoon. The earliest he could see you would be tomorrow morning, but Ms. Chun, I have to be honest with you. Even if you meet with him, the policy is unlikely to change. And the deadline is today. If payment isn't received, Maya will need to be withdrawn from enrollment effective immediately. The word immediately hung in the air like a sentence. There has to be something, Rachel heard herself saying, and hated the desperation creeping into her voice. Maya has a scholarship. She earned her place here. Her grades are perfect. She loves this school. This opportunity is everything to her. I know, and the scholarship committee was very impressed with her application. But the scholarship only covers a portion of the tuition. The balance is still the family's responsibility. Rachel's vision was blurring at the edges. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in this hallway, in front of this window, where other parents might see. Please, I'm begging you. There has to be a way. Mrs. Patterson removed her glasses, letting them hang from their chain. Her eyes held genuine regret. Miss Chun, if I could help you, I would. But my hands are tied. I process payments. I don't make policy. I'm sorry. The conversation was over. Rachel could feel it ending, could feel the door closing. She stood there for a moment longer, frozen, unable to move forward or step back. Then a voice spoke from behind her. Excuse me. Rachel turned. The man in the charcoal suit was standing there, closer now than he'd been before. Up close, she could see he was probably in his mid-40s, with dark hair showing hints of gray at the temples and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I apologize for interrupting," he said, his tone polite but assured. "But I couldn't help overhearing your conversation." Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks. The humiliation of her situation being overheard by a stranger was almost worse than the situation itself. "I'm sorry, this is a private matter. I understand. And normally, I wouldn't insert myself into something that isn't my concern. But in this case, I'd like to help if you'll allow me." He turned to Mrs. Patterson. "How much is the outstanding balance for Ms. Chen's daughter?" Mrs. Patterson looked startled. "I'm sorry, who are you?" The man reached into his jacket and produced a business card, sliding it across the counter. "Daniel Foster. I'm on the Board of Trustees for Riverside Academy." Rachel's heart stuttered. Board of Trustees. The people who made the policies Mrs. Patterson had just cited. The people who decided who stayed and who left. Mrs. Patterson picked up the card, studied it, and her entire demeanor changed. "Mr. Foster, I apologize. I didn't recognize you. We haven't met in person before. No need to apologize. I've only recently joined the board. I'm still attending my first few meetings, getting oriented." He smiled briefly, then returned his attention to Rachel. "Ms. Chun, I'd like to cover your daughter's tuition payment in full, if you're comfortable with that." Rachel stared at him. The words didn't make sense, wouldn't arrange themselves into meaning. "I'm sorry, what?" "The tuition balance. I like to pay it. Consider it taken care of." "I don't understand. You don't know me. You don't know Maya." Daniel Foster's expression was difficult to read, somewhere between serious and gentle. "You're right, I don't know you. But I know what it's like to watch opportunities slip away because of circumstances beyond your control. And I know that a child's education shouldn't be contingent on factors that have nothing to do with their merit or potential." Rachel was shaking her head before he'd finished speaking. "I can't accept that. It's too much. I can't take that kind of money from a stranger. You're not taking anything. I'm offering. There's a difference." He pulled out a wallet from his inside jacket pocket. Not a regular wallet, but something slim and black that radiated expense. From it, he extracted a credit card, black and minimalist, the kind Rachel had only seen in commercials. An elite card, the type that came with concierge services and no preset spending limits. He held it out toward Mrs. Patterson. "Please process the full amount for Maya Chen's tuition. And if there are any additional fees, activity costs, book expenses, anything else that needs to be covered, include those as well." Mrs. Patterson looked between Daniel Foster and Rachel, clearly uncertain about the protocol for this situation. "Mr. Foster, are you certain? The amount is quite substantial." "I'm certain. Please proceed." Rachel found her voice, though it came out strangled. "No, wait. I can't let you do this. You don't understand what you're offering." Daniel turned to her fully, his gaze steady and direct. "Ms. Chun, I understand exactly what I'm offering. $2,800, possibly more with additional costs. It's a significant amount to you. To me, it's a number on a statement that I'll barely notice." He paused. "That's not meant to sound arrogant. It's just a fact. I have resources that I can use to make a meaningful difference in someone's life. Why wouldn't I do that when the opportunity presents itself? Because people don't just do things like this. There has to be something you want in return." "There isn't. No strings, no expectations, no obligations. Your daughter keeps her place at the school. You don't have to worry about this particular burden anymore. That's all." Rachel felt tears pushing at the backs of her eyes. "Why? Why would you do this for us?" Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a shadow passing across his features. "Because someone should have done it for me once, and no one did. Because I spent too many years watching opportunities pass by while I stood on the outside. Because I can, and that should be reason enough." Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat softly. "Ms. Chun, if you're willing to accept Mr. Foster's offer, I can process the payment now. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll need to begin the withdrawal paperwork for your daughter." The choice was impossible. Accept charity from a complete stranger, or watch Maya lose everything she'd worked for. Pride versus practicality. Dignity versus desperation. Rachel looked across the hallway to where Maya still sat, now watching the scene unfold with wide, confused eyes. Her daughter, her brilliant, deserving daughter who studied until late into the night and asked questions about marine ecosystems and dreamed of making a difference in the world. She looked back at Daniel Foster, at this man who'd appeared out of nowhere with an offer that seemed too perfect to be real. "If I accept this," Rachel said slowly, "I want to pay you back. Every dollar. It might take me years, but I'll find a way." Daniel shook his head. "That's not necessary, and I won't accept repayment. But if it makes you feel better, consider it a loan from the universe. When you're in a position to help someone else someday, do it. That's the only payment I'd ever ask for." Rachel's hands were trembling. She pressed them together again, harder this time. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Daniel replied simply. "Let me do this." The moment stretched. Rachel could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the decision settling onto her shoulders. Every instinct she had told her not to trust this, that there was no such thing as free help, that accepting this would mean owing something she couldn't name. But another part of her, the part that had been stretched so thin for so long, the part that was tired of fighting every battle alone, that part was screaming at her to just say yes. She turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Okay, yes. Process the payment." Daniel handed over the elite black card. Mrs. Patterson took it with something resembling reverence, swiped it through her machine, and typed rapidly on her keyboard. The transaction took less than a minute. She printed a receipt, handed the card back to Daniel, and turned to Rachel with an expression that had transformed from sympathetic to congratulatory. "Ms. Chun, Maya's account is now paid in full through the end of the academic year. You're all set." Rachel took the receipt Mrs. Patterson offered her, staring at the numbers printed there. Payment received in full. Balance due, $0. It felt unreal. She'd walked into this hallway carrying an impossible burden, and now, in the span of a few minutes, it was gone. Lifted by a stranger with a black card and an inexplicable willingness to help. She looked at Daniel Foster, who was tucking his wallet back into his jacket. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. Just make sure Maya knows how valuable her education is. Make sure she takes full advantage of every opportunity this school offers." He glanced toward where Maya was still sitting. "She looks like a smart kid. I'm sure she'll make the most of it." "She will. She's incredible. She wants to be a marine biologist." Daniel smiled, the first full smile Rachel had seen from him. "The ocean needs more people who care about it. I hope she achieves that dream." Rachel felt tears spilling over now, couldn't stop them anymore. "Thank you. I keep saying it, but I don't think you understand what this means. You just changed everything for us." "I hope so. Every kid deserves a fighting chance." He gave a small nod, professional and polite, and began to turn away. "Wait," Rachel said. "Can I at least have your contact information? I'd like to send you updates about Maya, let you know how she's doing. You've invested in her education. You should know what comes of it." Daniel paused, seemed to consider this. Then he reached into his jacket again and produced another business card. "My email is on there. I'd be happy to hear how she progresses." Rachel took the card, holding it carefully. Daniel Foster, it read. Chief Executive Officer, Foster Development Group. Below that, an address in the financial district, a phone number, an email. "Foster Development Group," Rachel read aloud. "What do you develop?" "Real estate primarily. Commercial properties, residential complexes, mixed-use developments. We build things." He said it matter-of-factly, without pride or false modesty. "That must be interesting work." "It can be. It's also demanding, sometimes exhausting. But it allows me to do things like this when the opportunity arises, so I suppose that makes it worthwhile." Another parent approached the window, clearly waiting to conduct business. Daniel stepped aside, giving a final nod to Rachel. "Take care of yourself and your daughter, Ms. Chun." "We will. Thank you again. For everything." He walked away then, back down the hallway, toward the main entrance. Rachel watched him go, this stranger who'd just altered the trajectory of her life with a single swipe of a card. Maya appeared at her side, tugging gently on her sleeve. "Mom, what happened? Why are you crying?" Rachel wiped at her face, laughing a little through the tears. "It's okay, baby. Everything's okay. Your tuition is paid. You're staying at Riverside." Maya's eyes went wide. "Really? How?" Rachel glanced down the hallway, but Daniel Foster had already disappeared through the front doors. "Someone helped us. A very kind person helped us." "Boo, I'll explain later. Right now, I just want to get home." They walked out of the building together, Maya's hand in hers. The afternoon sun was bright after the fluorescent lighting inside, and Rachel had to squint against it. The parking lot stretched before them, their old Honda Civic sitting in the far corner where she'd parked it that morning. On the drive home, Maya peppered her with questions. Who was the person who helped? How did they know Mom needed help? Would they meet them again? Rachel answered as best she could, still trying to process what had happened herself. When they pulled up to their apartment building, Maya unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately get out. "Mom, are you sure everything's really okay?" Rachel turned to look at her daughter, at this perceptive, caring child who noticed too much and worried about things no 12-year-old should have to worry about. "Yes, sweetheart. I promise. Everything is okay. You've been really stressed lately. I know you have been, even though you try to hide it." Rachel felt her throat tighten again. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry I couldn't hide it better. I don't want you to hide it. I just want you to be okay." Maya's voice was small, younger than her usual self-assured tone. "I am now. Thanks to that man today, I am. And you are. We both are." They went inside, climbed the 3 flights to their apartment, entered the small space that was home. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, a living room barely big enough for their second-hand couch and television. But it was theirs, and it was clean, and it was filled with the evidence of their life together. Maya's school projects on the refrigerator, library books stacked on a coffee table, Rachel's work schedule pinned to the corkboard by the door. Rachel made dinner while Maya did homework at the kitchen table. Spaghetti with Jared's sauce, garlic bread from the discount bakery. Simple food that stretched the grocery budget. As she stirred the pasta, Rachel kept pulling Daniel Foster's business card from her pocket, reading the information printed there as if it might disappear. Chief Executive Officer. The title suggested wealth beyond what she could imagine, power and influence in circles she'd never access. And yet he'd used that position to help her, a single mother he'd never met, struggling with a problem that probably seemed insignificant to someone operating at his level. Why had he really done it? His explanation had been compelling, something about wanting to provide the opportunity he'd never had. But there had been something else in his expression when he'd said it, a pain he'd covered quickly but not completely. After dinner, after Maya had gone to her room to read before bed, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She typed Daniel Foster's name into the search engine, adding Foster Development Group for specificity. The results populated immediately. Article after article, profiles in business magazines, interviews in local papers. Daniel Foster, it turned out, was something of a legend in the real estate development world. He'd built his company from nothing 20 years ago, starting with a single renovation project in a neglected neighborhood and growing it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. The articles painted a picture of a brilliant but intensely private man. He rarely gave interviews, avoided social events, kept his personal life completely out of the public eye. There were no mentions of spouse, no children, no family. Just business achievement after business achievement, each one more impressive than the last. One article from 3 years ago caught Rachel's attention. The headline read, Foster Development Group announces major scholarship fund for underprivileged youth. She clicked on it, skimming through the text. Daniel Foster had apparently established a foundation that provided full scholarships to students from low-income families, covering everything from private school tuition to college expenses. The fund was substantial, millions of dollars distributed quietly without much fanfare. Foster declined to comment on his motivation for starting the scholarship fund, the article stated. But colleagues note that he takes a personal interest in each recipient, often meeting with students and their families directly. Rachel sat back, processing this information. Today hadn't been a random act of kindness. It was part of a pattern, a deliberate choice to use his resources to help others. But the articles didn't explain why, didn't reveal what had driven him to dedicate so much of his wealth to this cause. She thought about his words in the hallway. Because someone should have done it for me once, and no one did. What had his life been like? What opportunities had he missed? What doors had closed in his face while he stood on the outside looking in? Rachel didn't have answers, but she found herself wanting them. Wanting to understand this man who'd appeared in her life like some kind of guardian angel and then disappeared just as quickly. Her phone buzzed with a text. Her manager at the diner, confirming she was still available for the evening shift. Rachel stared at the message, then typed back that she was sorry, but something had come up and she couldn't make it tonight. It was a small rebellion, turning down extra work, but after the day she'd had, she needed an evening with her daughter. Needed to sit with the relief of knowing Maya's place at Riverside was secure, that the immediate crisis had passed. She went to Maya's room, knocked softly. "Can I come in?" "Sure, Mom." Maya was sitting on her bed, the marine biology book open in her lap. Her room was tiny, barely big enough for the twin bed, small desk, and bookshelf, but she'd made it her own. Posters of ocean scenes covered the walls. A collection of shells from their one beach trip lined the windowsill. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed. "I want to talk to you about what happened today." Maya closed her book, giving her mother full attention. "Okay. The man who paid your tuition, his name is Daniel Foster. He's a successful businessman, and apparently, he helps students like you fairly often. He has a whole scholarship program through his company. So we weren't special? He just does this for everyone." Rachel heard the slight disappointment in her daughter's voice and understood it. Everyone wanted to feel chosen, noticed, special. "I think every person he helps is special to him. And he did choose to help you today, even though he didn't have to. That makes you special. Are we going to see him again?" "I don't know, honey. Maybe. He gave me his card, so I can send him updates about how you're doing in school. Would you like that? Would you like him to know about your progress?" Maya thought about it, her expression serious. "Yeah, I think so. If he paid for me to be there, he should know I'm not wasting it." "You could never waste it, sweetheart. You're one of the brightest students in that school." "How do you know?" "You've never seen my grades compared to everyone else's." "I know because I'm your mother, and I see how hard you work. I see how much you care about learning. That's what makes someone bright, not just the grades but the desire to understand things." Maya smiled, the self-consciousness of a moment ago fading. "I do want to understand things. Like, I want to understand everything about the ocean, every ecosystem, every species, how it all connects and depends on each other. It's like this massive puzzle, and I want to see the whole picture." "You will," Rachel said with certainty. "You're going to do amazing things, Maya. You're going to study marine biology in college, and you're going to help protect the ocean, and you're going to make a real difference in the world." "You really believe that?" "With everything in me." They sat together for a while longer, talking about Maya's classes, her friends, the upcoming science fair project she wanted to start planning. Normal conversation, the kind Rachel treasured because it meant they were okay, they were stable, they had the luxury of thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. When Rachel finally left Maya's room and returned to the kitchen, she found herself staring at Daniel Foster's business card again. On impulse, she opened her laptop and composed an email. "Dear Mr. Foster," she typed, "I hope you don't mind me reaching out so soon, but I wanted to express my gratitude again for what you did today. I've been trying to find adequate words since you walked away, but nothing seems sufficient. You didn't just pay a bill. You preserved my daughter's future, gave her the chance to continue at a school where she's thriving, where she's challenged and supported and encouraged to dream big." Rachel paused, considering what else to say. How much to reveal about their situation, about how close they'd come to losing everything. "I know you said you don't want repayment, but I want you to know that your kindness won't be forgotten. Maya and I will both work to honor what you've done. She'll continue to excel in her studies, and I'll continue to teach her that education is a privilege worth fighting for." She reread the email, added one more line. "If you're ever willing to meet Maya properly, to see firsthand the student you've helped, we'd be honored. But I understand if you prefer to keep your distance. Either way, thank you from the bottom of my heart." Rachel signed it, attached Maya's most recent report card as proof of her academic performance, and hit send before she could second-guess herself. The email whooshed away into the digital void. She closed the laptop, unsure if Daniel Foster would even read it, much less respond. But it felt important to have written it, to have acknowledged what he'd done in more than just the rushed thanks she'd managed in the school hallway. That night, Rachel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. She thought about the line at the bursar's office, about her speech rehearsed and then never delivered, about Mrs. Patterson's sympathetic but firm face. She thought about the moment Daniel Foster had stepped forward, about his calm assurance, about the black credit cards sliding across the counter. Most of all, she thought about his words. Because someone should have done it for me once, and no one did. Who had he been before he became a CEO, with resources to spare? What version of himself had stood in lines like the one Rachel had stood in today, carrying burdens too heavy, facing doors swinging closed? Rachel wanted to know his story, wanted to understand the path that led from wherever he'd started to where he was now. Wanted to thank him properly, more than just words in a hallway could convey. But more than anything, she wanted to make sure his investment in Maya wasn't misplaced. Wanted to prove that this girl, this brilliant, ocean-obsessed child sleeping in the next room, was worth every dollar of that tuition payment. Rachel finally fell asleep with that thought, with the promise to herself that she'd make Daniel Foster proud, that she'd show him his faith in them hadn't been misplaced. She had no way of knowing, drifting off in that small apartment, that this was only the beginning, that the man who'd paid Maya's school fees would become far more than a generous stranger, that his appearance in their lives would mark the start of something neither of them could have predicted. All Rachel knew that night was that they'd survived another crisis, that Maya was safe at Riverside Academy, and that somewhere in the city, a man named Daniel Foster had changed their lives without asking for anything in return. It would take time to understand why. It would take time to see the full picture. But time, for once, was something they had. The deadline had passed, the payment was made, and the future stretched. The email response arrived 3 days later, on a Thursday morning while Rachel was restocking napkin dispensers of the diner. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket during the lull between breakfast and lunch rushes. She wiped her hands on her uniform and pulled it out, expecting another shift notification or maybe a message from Maya's school about an upcoming event. Instead, the preview showed a sender name that made her pause mid-motion. Daniel Foster. Rachel glanced around the empty dining room, then stepped into the back hallway near the kitchen where she could read without interruption. Her heart was beating faster than the situation warranted, but something about seeing his name on her screen felt significant. The email was brief but warm. He thanked her for reaching out, said he was pleased to see Maya's excellent grades, and expressed genuine interest in meeting her properly if Rachel was still comfortable with that. He suggested coffee sometime in the next week, somewhere convenient for Rachel's schedule. No pressure, he'd written. Just a chance to hear more about Maya's aspirations and perhaps answer any questions you might have. Rachel read it twice, looking for hidden meanings or ulterior motives the way she'd learned to do after years of being disappointed by people's false generosity. But the message seemed straightforward, sincere even. He wanted to meet Maya. He was interested in her future. Nothing more complicated than that. She typed a response quickly before her break ended. Saturday afternoon would work well if he was available. There was a coffee shop near the library where Maya liked to study, a quiet place with good pastries and comfortable chairs. Would that suit him? His reply came within minutes. Perfect. 2 o'clock. Rachel confirmed, pocketed her phone, and returned to the dining room, feeling an odd mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She was about to introduce her daughter to a man who'd essentially become their benefactor, though that word felt too formal, too transactional for what had happened. Daniel Foster had given them something that couldn't be easily categorized or repaid. When she picked Maya up from school that afternoon, she mentioned the plan meeting. Maya's reaction was immediate curiosity mixed with caution, the same wariness Rachel often saw in herself. "What do we talk about with him?" Maya asked, buckling her seatbelt in the passenger seat. "Whatever feels natural, I suppose. He wants to hear about your interests, your plans. He cares about education, about students succeeding. I think he genuinely wants to know you're making the most of the opportunity he provided. What if I say something wrong? What if he thinks he wasted his money on me?" Rachel reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "That's impossible. You couldn't disappoint him if you tried. Just be yourself. That's all anyone can ask. But Maya's anxiety didn't fully dissipate, and Rachel understood it. They were both out of practice with this kind of interaction, meeting with someone from a completely different world, someone whose casual generosity exceeded their annual income. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of spring day that made people remember why they lived through harsh winters. Rachel and Maya arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, a habit born from years of never wanting to be the one who kept others waiting. They chose a table near the window where natural light spilled across the worn wooden surface. Maya had dressed carefully, wearing her nicest jeans and a clean sweater, her hair braided neatly down her back. She kept fidgeting with her hands, folding and unfolding them on the table. "Relax, baby," Rachel murmured. "He's just a person who paid thousands of dollars for me to go to school. That's not just a person, Mom." Before Rachel could respond, the door opened and Daniel Foster entered. He spotted them immediately and approached with an easy stride, dressed more casually than he'd been at the school in dark jeans and a navy sweater that probably cost more than Rachel's monthly rent but didn't advertise it. "Ms. Chun," he greeted, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Please call me Rachel." She shook his hand, noting the firm but not aggressive grip. "And this is Maya." Daniel turned his attention to the girl, and something in his expression softened. He didn't crouch down or adopt the condescending tone some adults use with children. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat across from them at eye level. "Maya, it's a pleasure to meet you properly. Your mother showed me your report card. Those are impressive grades." Maya's cheeks colored slightly. "Thank you, sir. Daniel is fine. Sir makes me feel ancient." He smiled, and it transformed his face from serious to approachable. "Your mom mentioned you're interested in marine biology. That's a fascinating field." "It is," Maya said, her initial nervousness beginning to crack. Most people don't think about how important the ocean is, but it produces more than half the world's oxygen and regulates the climate. Without healthy oceans, we're in serious trouble. "You sound like you've done your research." "I read everything I can find. My teacher, Mr. Harrison, he sometimes brings in extra materials for me because I finish the regular assignments so quickly. He says I have a gift for scientific thinking." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That's a valuable gift. What aspect of marine biology interests you most?" Maya launched into an explanation about coral reef ecosystems and their critical role in ocean health, her hands moving as she talked, her earlier anxiety forgotten. Rachel watched the exchange with growing amazement. Daniel wasn't just being polite. He was asking follow-up questions, making connections to things he'd read, engaging with Maya's passion in a way that clearly delighted her. A server approached, and they ordered coffee for the adults, hot chocolate for Maya, and a selection of pastries that Daniel insisted on despite Rachel's protest that it wasn't necessary. "So where did this love of the ocean come from?" Daniel asked once the server left. "Did you grow up near the coast?" "No, we've only been to the beach once," Maya admitted. "But Mom took me to the aquarium when I was little, and I just fell in love with all of it. The colors, the way everything moved, how complex it all was. I stood in front of the reef tank for so long that the security guard thought something was wrong." Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that surprised Rachel with its warmth. "I can picture that. Sometimes you find a thing you're meant to do, and it just captures you completely. Did that happen with you?" Maya asked with the directness only children could manage. "With building things?" Something flickered across Daniel's face, there and gone so quickly Rachel almost missed it. "In a way. Though I came to my career less from passion and more from necessity. I needed to make a living, and I happened to be good at seeing potential in spaces other people overlooked." "But you must like it now," Maya pressed. "Otherwise, why would you keep doing it?" "I do like it, but I like what it allows me to do even more. The work itself is satisfying, but having the resources to help others, that's what makes it meaningful." Their order arrived, and conversation shifted to lighter topics. Daniel asked about Maya's other classes, her friends, her favorite books. He spoke to her like an equal, never talking down, never dismissing her opinions as childish. Rachel found herself relaxing into the exchange, contributing occasionally, but mostly watching this unexpected mentorship beginning to form. At one point, Maya excused herself to use the restroom, leaving Rachel and Daniel alone at the table. An easy silence settled between them. Not awkward, but companionable. "She's remarkable," Daniel said, stirring sugar into his second cup of coffee. "You should be very proud." "I am. Every single day. It's clear she gets her intelligence and determination from you." Rachel shook her head. "I'm just trying to keep up with her most days. She's always been like this, curious about everything, wanting to understand how things work. When she was 4, she took apart a radio to see what made the sound. Never could get it back together, but she learned something from the attempt." Daniel smiled. "That's the mark of a true scientist, willing to break things in pursuit of understanding." "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said, the question emerging before she could consider whether it was appropriate. "Of course. Why did you really help us that day? And please don't give me the answer you gave at school. I've been thinking about it for weeks, and I keep feeling like there's more to it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window, where afternoon sunlight painted the street in gold. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight it hadn't before. "When I was 11, I was accepted to a private middle school on a partial scholarship. Similar situation to Maya's. The scholarship covered most of it, but not everything. My mother was raising me alone, working 2 jobs, barely keeping us afloat. The remaining tuition might as well have been $1 million. He paused, and Rachel waited, sensing this was a story he didn't share often. She tried everything. Talked to the school, tried to set up payment plans, asked family members who had even less than we did. Nothing worked. The deadline came and went, and I had to return to my neighborhood public school. It was overcrowded, underfunded, and I spent the next 7 years being told I had potential but given no real tools to develop it." "I'm sorry," Rachel said quietly. "I survived, obviously. Worked my way through community college, then state university, built my career from nothing. But I always wondered who I might have become if I'd had that opportunity at 11. What doors might have opened if someone had just stepped in and helped when it mattered most. So, when you saw us in that hallway, I saw my mother. I saw myself. I saw a chance to change an outcome that didn't have to end the way mine did." He looked back at Rachel, his expression open in a way she suspected was rare for him. "That's the real reason. Not charity, not tax deductions, not public relations. Just a desire to rewrite one small part of story I lived through and couldn't change." Rachel felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "Maya won't waste this chance. I promise you that. I don't think she could waste it if she tried. She has something special, Rachel. A clarity of purpose most people spend their whole lives searching for. Your job now is just to keep obstacles out of her path so she can reach it. That's what I'm trying to do. Not always successfully. You're doing better than you think." She's confident, articulate, passionate about her interests. Those don't happen by accident. That's good parenting. The compliment landed somewhere deep in Rachel's chest, filling a space she hadn't realized was hollow. She'd spent so many years questioning every decision, wondering if she was enough, if she was doing right by her daughter. Hearing it from someone else, from someone who seemed to genuinely see them both, mattered more than she could articulate. Maya returned, sliding back into her seat and immediately reaching for a pastry. "Sorry, I didn't mean to take so long. There was a line." "No problem," Daniel said easily. "Your mom and I were just talking about how impressive you are. Mom always says that. She's biased. I'm not biased. I barely know you, and I'm still impressed." Maya grinned, pleased despite her attempt at modesty. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing naturally through topics as varied as climate change, Maya's favorite authors, and Daniel's description of a new sustainable housing project his company was developing. When they finally stood to leave, Daniel walked them to the door. "I'd like to stay in touch, if that's all right with both of you. Maybe we could do this again sometime." "We'd like that," Rachel said, meaning it completely. "And Maya, if you ever want recommendations for books or resources about marine biology, or if you have questions about college planning, feel free to email me. I know some people in the environmental science field who might be helpful as you get older." Maya's eyes widened. Really? You do that? Of course. Investing in someone's education doesn't stop at tuition payments. It's about opening doors, making connections, providing guidance. I'm happy to do all of that if you want. They said their goodbyes, and Rachel drove home, with Maya chattering excitedly in the passenger seat about everything Daniel had said, the suggestions he'd made, the possibilities he'd mentioned. Rachel let her talk, content to listen, feeling something shifting in her understanding of their situation. Daniel Foster wasn't just a benefactor. He was becoming something more complex, something harder to define. A mentor, perhaps. An advocate. Someone genuinely invested in Maya's success, not because he had to be, but because he wanted to be. Over the following weeks, a pattern established itself. Daniel would email Maya with articles about marine conservation or links to documentaries about ocean ecosystems. Maya would respond with her thoughts, questions, observations. Sometimes Rachel would add her own notes, thanking him for his continued interest. They met for coffee again 2 weeks later, then again 3 weeks after that. The meetings became a comfortable routine, something Maya looked forward to with visible excitement. Daniel would ask about school, about her latest projects, about challenges she was facing. He listened with genuine attention and offered advice that was practical, never condescending. One Saturday in May, Daniel suggested something different. Instead of coffee, he wanted to take them somewhere. He'd been vague about the destination, asking only if they were free for the full afternoon and could they dress for being outdoors. Rachel agreed with mild trepidation, still not entirely comfortable with accepting more from him. But Maya's enthusiasm overrode her hesitation. They met Daniel in the parking lot of a shopping center on the edge of town. He was driving a different car than Rachel had seen before, a practical SUV rather than the luxury sedan she'd glimpsed at the school. "Where are we going?" Maya asked the moment she saw him, unable to contain her curiosity. "It's a surprise, but I think you'll like it." They drove for nearly 2 hours, heading west toward the coast. Rachel realized the destination before Maya did, recognition dawning as the landscape changed, as signs for beach towns began appearing along the highway. "Are we going to the ocean?" Maya asked, her voice climbing with excitement. "We are," Daniel confirmed. "I thought it was time you saw your future workplace." Maya practically bounced in her seat. Rachel caught Daniel's eye in the rearview mirror and mouthed thank you. He smiled and returned his attention to the road. The beach town was small and charming, the kind of place that existed primarily for summer tourists but retained a quiet dignity in the off-season. Daniel parked near a marina where boats bobbed gently in their slips and the air tasted of salt and seaweed. They walked along the dock first, Daniel pointing out different types of vessels and explaining their purposes. He seemed knowledgeable about boats in a way Rachel hadn't expected, discussing hull designs and navigation equipment with casual expertise. "Do you sail?" Maya asked. "I used to. Had a small boat for a few years. Sold it when work got too demanding, but I still miss being out on the water." "What was it like, being out there with nothing around you?" Daniel considered the question seriously. "Humbling. The ocean makes you realize how small you are, how little control you have over the forces that shape the world, but also peaceful. There's a clarity that comes from being surrounded by that much water, that much life happening beneath the surface." They continued to the beach itself, where Maya immediately kicked off her shoes and ran toward the water. Rachel followed more slowly, conscious of Daniel beside her, both of them watching as Maya stood at the edge of the surf, letting waves wash over her feet. "This was incredibly kind of you," Rachel said. She hasn't stopped talking about the ocean since our last visit years ago. This will mean everything to her. I'm glad I could make it happen. Every future marine biologist should spend time by the sea. They walked along the shore while Maya explored, collecting shells and examining tide pools with intense focus. At one point, she called them over to show them a small crab she'd found, her face alight with discovery. Daniel crouched beside the tide pool, listening as Maya explained what type of crab it was and what it ate and where it fit in the local ecosystem. He asked questions that demonstrated he was actually listening, that he cared about her answers. Rachel stood back slightly, watching this interaction, and felt something shift in her chest. This was more than mentorship. There was genuine affection in how Daniel engaged with Maya, a paternal quality he probably didn't even recognize in himself. They had lunch at a small seafood restaurant overlooking the water. Maya ordered fish tacos and peppered Daniel with questions about his business, his travels, his opinions on environmental policy. He answered everything with patience and honesty, never simplifying his responses just because she was 12. On the drive back, Maya fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from sun and salt air and excitement. Rachel twisted around to check on her, then settled back into her seat. "Today was perfect," she said softly. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate, but thank you. It was my pleasure. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I spent an afternoon like that, just enjoying being somewhere without any agenda or schedule. You must be busy with work. Constantly. Sometimes I wonder what I'm building it all for, what the point is of accumulating more projects and more revenue. Days like today remind me there are better ways to spend time." Rachel studied his profile as he drove, the way the late afternoon light caught the gray at his temples. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I might not answer, but you can ask." "Why are you alone?" "I don't mean that rudely. I just mean you're successful, you're kind, you clearly enjoy connecting with people. It seems like you'd have a family of your own." Daniel was quiet for so long Rachel thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, careful. "I was engaged once, about 15 years ago. She was smart and ambitious, and we seemed good together on paper. But the closer we got to the wedding, the more I realized we wanted completely different things. She wanted the appearance of success, the house in the right neighborhood, membership at the right clubs. I wanted to actually do something meaningful with what I'd built." He paused, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel. "When I started talking about using company profits to fund scholarships, about developing affordable housing instead of luxury condos, she thought I was going through a phase. Said I'd grow out of it. I realized I didn't want to grow out of it. It was the first thing I'd wanted to do that felt more important than just making money. We ended the engagement, and I haven't really let anyone that close since." "That must be lonely." "Sometimes, but it's also simpler. No one to disappoint. No one whose expectations I need to manage. I can focus on work and on projects like the scholarship fund without feeling guilty about neglecting a family." "That's a sad way to live." Daniel glanced at her, surprised. "Is it?" "Yes. You're denying yourself connection because you're afraid of disappointment. But connection is what makes life meaningful. Without it, what's the point of any success you achieve?" That's surprisingly philosophical for a Saturday evening. "I'm serious. Look at today. Look at how happy you made Maya. That matters more than any business deal or development project. That's real impact." "Maybe, but it's also temporary. In a few years, Maya will be off to college, pursuing her dreams. You'll both move on with your lives. I'll just be the person who helped once." Rachel shook her head firmly. "You're wrong. You're not just someone who helped once. You're becoming part of our lives. Maya talks about you constantly. She quotes things you've said. She researches topics you mention. She looks forward to seeing you. That's not temporary. That's real." Daniel didn't respond immediately, his attention seemingly fixed on the road ahead. But Rachel saw his jaw tighten slightly, saw him swallow hard as though forcing down emotion he wasn't ready to acknowledge. They drove in comfortable silence after that, the sky darkening as they headed inland. Maya woke when they were 20 minutes from home, groggy and disoriented until she remembered where they'd been. "That was the best day," she announced sleepily. "Can we do it again?" "Absolutely," Daniel said. "Anytime you want." When they reached the apartment, Daniel walked them to the building entrance despite Rachel's insistence it wasn't necessary. Maya hugged him goodbye, a spontaneous gesture that clearly caught him off guard. He returned it awkwardly, but sincerely, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Thank you for today," Maya said. "For real. It was perfect." "You're welcome. Study hard, and I'll see you soon." After Maya went inside, Rachel lingered. "She's getting attached to you. I hope that's okay." "It's more than okay. I'm getting attached too, if I'm honest." "Good. Because whether you planned it or not, you're part of this family now. Whatever that means to you, however you want to define it, you're in our lives, and I don't see that changing." Daniel's expression was difficult to read in the dim light of the entranceway. I'm not good at family. I proved that when I walked away from the engagement, when I chose work over building something with another person. Maybe you just hadn't found the right people to build with. Maybe it doesn't have to look like a traditional family to be real. What are you saying? Rachel took a breath, gathering courage. I'm saying Maya needs positive influences in her life. She needs someone who believes in her potential and pushes her to reach it. You're doing that. You're being what she needs. Don't underestimate the value of that, because it doesn't fit conventional definitions. And what about you? What do you need? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither seemed ready to fully explore. Rachel felt her pulse quicken, but kept her voice steady. I need to know that the people in my daughter's life are there for the right reasons. That they care about her as a person, not as a project or a tax deduction. I need to trust that they won't disappear when things get complicated or inconvenient. I'm not going anywhere, Rachel. I mean that. Then we're good. Better than good. You're welcome in our lives for as long as you want to be here. Daniel nodded slowly, seeming to absorb this declaration. I should let you go. It's late and Maya needs rest. She'll sleep well tonight. She always does after days at the beach. Good. Take care of yourself, Rachel. You too, Daniel. She watched him walk back to his car, watched him drive away into the night. Then she went inside, climbed the stairs to their apartment, found Maya already in pajamas and brushing her teeth. Mom, Maya called from the bathroom. Do you think Daniel likes us? Rachel leaned against the doorframe. I know he likes us. Why do you ask? Because he seems lonely, like he has all this success, but nobody to share it with. I wish he had a family. Maybe he does now. Maybe that's what we're becoming. Maya rinsed her mouth and turned to face her mother. Like, we could be his family, even though we're not related? Family isn't just about biology, baby. It's about who shows up for you, who cares about your happiness, who wants to see you succeed. By that definition, Daniel is definitely family. I like that. I like him being family. Me too. That night, after Maya was asleep, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She drafted an email to Daniel, then deleted it, then started again. Finally, she settled on something simple. Today was wonderful. Thank you for giving Maya an experience she'll remember forever. And thank you for being patient with us as we figure out what this relationship is becoming. I meant what I said tonight. You're part of our family now, however unconventional that family might look. We're grateful for you. She hit send before she could overthink it, then closed the laptop and went to bed. Daniel's response was waiting when she woke the next morning. Rachel, yesterday was one of the best days I've had in longer than I can remember. Watching Maya discover things, listening to her questions, seeing her passion for the ocean come alive, that was a gift. I've spent so many years focused on building and acquiring and succeeding in ways that ultimately feel empty. Being part of your lives gives all of that purpose. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for redefining what family can mean. I'm grateful too, more than you know. Rachel read the message 3 times, each time finding new meaning in the spaces between words. This man who'd appeared in their lives by chance, who'd stepped forward when no one else would, was becoming essential. Not because of his money or his connections or what he could provide materially, but because of who he was, the care he offered, the way he saw Maya's potential and honored it. They were building something together, the 3 of them, something that didn't have a name yet, but felt solid and real and worth protecting. The following month brought more changes. Daniel started attending Maya's science fair presentation, where she'd built a detailed model of a coral reef ecosystem complete with information about symbiotic relationships and environmental threats. He stood in the back of the gymnasium with other parents, but his presence meant everything to Maya. She spotted him immediately, and her presentation gained confidence, her voice strengthening as she explained her project. She won 2nd place in her category. Daniel took them out to celebrate, to a nice restaurant where the menu had no prices and the servers wore black ties. Maya ordered the most exotic seafood dish she could find and talked nonstop about ideas for next year's science fair. You know what would be really impressive? Daniel said during dessert. If you could intern somewhere next summer, get real-world experience in marine science. I might know some people at the Coastal Research Station who'd be willing to take on a motivated student. Maya's eyes went wide. You could do that? Give me an actual internship? I can make some calls. No promises, but I think there's a good chance. You're exactly the kind of young person they want to encourage. That would be incredible. That would be like the best thing ever. Rachel watched this exchange with mixed emotions. Gratitude for Daniel's continued support. Anxiety about Maya growing too dependent on his interventions. And something else, something she was increasingly unable to ignore. She was developing feelings for Daniel that went beyond appreciation for his generosity. She noticed small things now. The way he smiled when Maya made him laugh. The careful attention he paid when either of them spoke. The subtle ways he'd started dressing more casually for their meetings, as though he was consciously shedding the corporate armor he wore in his business life. She noticed how comfortable their silences had become, how easily conversation flowed when they were together, how his presence had shifted from remarkable to normal to essential. It terrified her. Getting involved with Daniel would complicate everything. He was their benefactor, Maya's mentor, the person who'd quite literally save them from disaster. Starting a romantic relationship with him felt like it would fundamentally alter the dynamic they'd built, potentially ruining something precious. But the feelings persisted, growing stronger each time they met. Each email exchanged, each moment she caught him looking at her with something that seemed distinctly beyond platonic interest. One evening in June, after Maya had gone to bed following another coffee shop meeting, Rachel's phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. They'd texted frequently, but rarely called. She answered with mild concern that something was wrong. "Hi, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. Maya just went to bed." "What's up?" Daniel hesitated, unusual for him. "I wanted to ask you something, but I'm not sure how to approach it without making things awkward." Rachel's pulse quickened. "You can ask me anything. I have tickets to a charity gala next weekend. It's for an environmental foundation that does ocean conservation work. I thought Maya might be interested, but it's an evening event and mostly adults. I wasn't sure if that would be appropriate." "She'd love it. Absolutely love it. But you're right that it's probably more of an adult thing. What if you both came? You as my guest, Maya as a young student interested in the cause. The foundation leadership would probably be thrilled to meet someone her age who's passionate about marine science." Rachel processed the invitation, trying to read between the lines. "Are you asking me on a date?" "I'm asking you to a work event that happens to be formal and might actually be enjoyable. Whether that qualifies as a date probably depends on how we both feel about it." Despite the nervousness fluttering in her stomach, Rachel smiled. "That's very diplomatic. I'm trying to give you an out if you want one. I'm aware that our situation is complicated. You don't owe me anything, Rachel. If this feels like too much or crosses a line, please just say so. What if I don't want an out?" Silence on the line, heavy with possibility. "Then I'd be very happy to have you and Maya join me next Saturday," Daniel finally said, his voice warm. "We'll be there. Fair warning, though, I haven't been to anything formal in years. I might be rusty on gala etiquette." "You'll be perfect. Just be yourself." They talked for another 20 minutes about logistical details, what time he'd pick them up, what the dress code was, who else would be attending. But underneath the practical conversation was an undercurrent of something new, an acknowledgement that they were moving into different territory. When they finally said goodnight, Rachel sat on the couch staring at her phone, equal parts excited and terrified about what was beginning to happen. She was falling for Daniel Foster. The man who'd saved her daughter's education was becoming the man she couldn't stop thinking about, couldn't imagine her life without. The realization should have felt wrong or complicated or fraught with potential problems. Instead, it felt inevitable, like a wave that had been building for months finally reaching shore. Everything was changing. The question was whether she was brave enough to let it. The gala transformed everything. Not because of the elegant ballroom, or the famous speakers, or the cause itself, though all of those things mattered. It transformed things because of a single moment on the terrace overlooking the city, when Daniel had taken Rachel's hand and said what they'd both been thinking for months. I don't want to be just Maya's mentor anymore. I don't want to be just your friend. I want more than that, if you'll let me. Rachel had looked at him in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, at his face open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before, and realized she'd been waiting for him to say exactly those words. I want that too, she'd whispered back. That had been 6 months ago. Now it was December, and everything had settled into something that felt remarkably like contentment. Daniel had dinner with them twice a week, sometimes more. He attended Maya's school events, helped with science projects, took them on weekend trips to museums and aquariums. He'd become woven into the fabric of their daily lives so seamlessly that Rachel sometimes forgot there had been a time before him. The relationship progressed slowly, carefully, both of them conscious of Maya and her feelings about the changing dynamic. But Maya had surprised them both with her enthusiastic approval. "It's about time," she'd said when they'd sat her down to explain that they were dating. "I was starting to think you were both too scared to do anything about it." Now Rachel stood in Daniel's downtown apartment for the first time, having dropped Maya at a friend's house for a sleepover. The space was beautiful but impersonal, all modern furniture and expensive artwork that looked like it had been selected by a decorator rather than lived with. "It's not very homey, is it?" Daniel said, following her gaze around the living room. "It's impressive, but no, not particularly homey. I've never really thought of it as home. It's just where I sleep between work commitments." He moved to stand beside her at the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I've been thinking about selling it, actually." "Why?" "Because it doesn't fit my life anymore. The life I want, anyway." He turned to face her fully. "Rachel, I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you'll react." Her stomach tightened with sudden anxiety. "That sounds ominous." "It's not bad. At least, I hope you won't think so." He took her hands in his. "I've fallen in love with you. With both of you, really. You and Maya have become my family in every way that matters. And I don't want to keep living in this separate space, in this separate life. I want to be with you properly." Rachel's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want us to live together. I want to wake up with you every morning and help Maya with homework at the kitchen table and be there for all the ordinary moments, not just the special occasions. I know it's fast, and I know there are practical considerations, but I can't imagine my life without both of you in it anymore." Tears were streaming down Rachel's face before she realized she was crying. "Daniel, I love you too. So much. But this is a huge step. I know. And if you need more time, I understand completely. But I wanted you to know where I stand, what I want our future to look like." Rachel thought about their small apartment, about the life she'd built there with Maya. And she thought about the life they could build together, the three of them. A real family, chosen and deliberate and full of love. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want that too." They found a house 3 weeks later, nothing extravagant but spacious and warm, with a yard and good schools nearby, and a room for Maya that she immediately claimed as her marine biology headquarters. Moving day was chaos, boxes everywhere, Maya directing traffic like a tiny general, Daniel assembling furniture with the focused determination he brought to everything. That first night in the new house, they ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor because the dining table wasn't set up yet. Maya fell asleep on the couch halfway through a movie, exhausted from the excitement. Daniel carried her to bed while Rachel cleaned up, both of them moving through these domestic rituals like they'd done them 1,000 times before. Later, lying in bed in their new room, Rachel turned to Daniel. "Do you ever regret it? That day at the school, when you stepped in? Do you ever wish you just minded your own business?" Daniel pulled her closer. "That was the best decision I've ever made. It brought me to you, to Maya, to this life. I spent 40 years building a career and accumulating success that meant nothing. Now I have everything that matters. We're lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Rachel. You gave me a family when I'd given up on ever having one. You and Maya saved me as much as I helped you." 3 months later, Daniel proposed, not with a grand gesture or elaborate planning, but on an ordinary Tuesday evening while they were making dinner together. Maya was setting the table, music was playing from the speaker in the corner, and everything felt perfect in its simplicity. "Marry me," Daniel said, turning from the stove to look at Rachel. She nearly dropped the salad bowl. What? Marry me. Make this official. Let me be Maya's stepfather legally, not just in practice. Build this life with me permanently. Maya appeared in the doorway. Did he just propose? I think so, Rachel said, laughing and crying simultaneously. Well, say yes, Mom. Obviously say yes. Rachel looked at Daniel, at this man who'd appeared in her life when she needed him most and stayed because he wanted to, because he'd found something with them he'd been searching for without knowing it. Yes. Obviously yes. The wedding was small, just close friends and Maya as the maid of honor. Rachel wore a simple dress she'd found on sale, because some habits died hard, though Daniel had offered to buy her anything she wanted. What mattered wasn't the details, but the commitment, the promise they were making to each other and to Maya. I promise to love you both, Daniel said in his vows. To show up every day, to be present for the good and the difficult, to be the family you deserve. Rachel's vows were simpler. You saw us when we needed to be seen. You helped when no one else would. And you stayed because you wanted to, not because you had to. I promise to love you for all of that, and for everything you are. Maya gave a short speech at the reception about how sometimes families are made, not born, and how grateful she was that Daniel had chosen them. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. 2 years passed in a blur of ordinary happiness. Maya started high school with a full scholarship to a prestigious academy that Daniel absolutely did not pull any strings to arrange, though Rachel suspected otherwise. She was thriving, already planning for college, already researching marine biology programs. Daniel had scaled back his work commitments, focusing on projects that mattered rather than projects that simply generated revenue. He'd expanded the scholarship program, helped develop affordable housing in 3 different neighborhoods, and spent more time at home than he ever had in his entire career. Rachel had gone back to school herself, taking night classes toward a business degree Daniel encouraged her to pursue. The diner promoted her to assistant manager. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. Better than good. It was everything she'd never let herself dream about during those desperate years alone. One evening in early spring, the 3 of them sat on their back porch watching the sunset. Maya was reading. Daniel was reviewing blueprints for a new community center, and Rachel was just enjoying the peace of the moment. Hey, Mom, Maya said without looking up from her book. Remember that day at school when you couldn't pay the tuition? Of course I remember. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Daniel hadn't been there. Where I'd be now if he hadn't helped. Daniel set down his blueprints. You would have found another way, Maya. You're too determined not to succeed. Maybe, but it would have been harder. A lot harder. She finally looked up, her gaze moving between Rachel and Daniel. I just want you both to know I don't take any of this for granted. This life, this family, the opportunities one have. I know how close we came to losing it all. Rachel felt familiar tears threatening. We know, sweetheart, and we're so proud of the person you're becoming. I'm going to pay it forward, Maya continued. When I'm successful, when I'm doing the work I want to do, I'm going to help other kids the way Daniel helped me. I'm going to make sure they get their chances too. Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. That's all I could ever hope for. That's how we change things, one person helping another, creating a chain of opportunity and support. Later that night, after Maya had gone to bed, Rachel and Daniel remained on the porch. The air was warm, carrying the scent of the garden they'd planted together. Do you remember what you said that first day? Rachel asked. About paying it forward being the only repayment you'd accept? I remember. Maya's already doing it. She volunteers at the community center, tutors younger kids in science, talks about her plans to make a difference. You didn't just change our lives, Daniel. You set something in motion that's going to keep spreading. We did that together. You raised an incredible daughter. I just helped remove some obstacles. You did more than that. You showed us what family could be. You proved that there are still good people who help without expecting anything in return. You gave us hope. Daniel pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. You gave me purpose. You gave me love. You gave me a reason to be more than just a successful businessman. Fair trade, I'd say. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Rachel thought about that desperate morning in the bursar's office, about standing in line with $47 and no solutions. She thought about Daniel appearing like some kind of miracle, about his black credit card changing everything. But it wasn't really the money that had saved them. It was the connection that followed, the relationship that developed, the family they'd built together from pieces that shouldn't have fit, but somehow created something whole. "Thank you," Rachel whispered. "For what?" "For seeing us. For staying. For loving us. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for giving me a home." Inside the house, a light turned on in Maya's room. Probably staying up late reading again, lost in some book about ocean conservation or marine ecosystems. Their daughter, brilliant and determined and kind, pursuing dreams that were no longer impossible but inevitable. This was what mattered. Not wealth or status or impressive careers, though those things had their place. What mattered was this: a family gathered under one roof, people who chose each other and showed up every day, love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something that would last a lifetime. Daniel had paid for tuition with his elite card that day, but what he'd really paid for was a future for all of them. A future they were living now, grateful and grounded and impossibly, wonderfully happy. The story that began in a school hallway had led them here, to this porch, to this life, to this family. And it was far better than any ending Rachel could have written herself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.